Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Ramon Ramos and I create geometric paper sculptures that blend art with precision. In this video, I will walk you through the creative process of making one of my latest pieces, from design to the finished artwork. Let's get started. For this piece, I aimed to step away from my usual pattern-driven style and explore something different. I knew it would come with a whole new set of challenges, both technically and artistically, that I was eager to tackle. My vision was still vague at the start, but one thing I knew was that I wanted to use the golden ratio in a landscape format. In terms of composition and design, I wanted to feature several pseudo-cylinders on the left, arranged in a specific way, with the largest one at the center of the cluster drawing the most attention. The cylinders on both sides would gradually fade either by being smaller or less deep, or perhaps through a less intense color. I also decided to take a risk by leaving a large, almost empty space on the right. As for the overall direction, I picture some kind of stripes extending from left to right at an ascending angle, conveying a sense of positivity or uplift. I also plan for one or a few of these stripes to stand out in the center, potentially in solid black. My goal was to make the stripes dynamic, maybe organic in quality. With all this in mind, I created my first sketch. I began modeling the cylinders and working on the composition in Blender. And before long, I was pleased with the results. The tricky part, however, was the stripes. I needed them to be bold and impactful, overlapping and interacting with the volumes, but I was still feeling uncertain about how to approach it. I often imagine the creative process as entering a labyrinth and then searching for the exit at the other end. I try different paths, encounter numerous dead ends, and only through persistence do I eventually find the right outcome. I kept bouncing back and forth between Blender and Photoshop to figure out the stripes. My initial attempts were far from successful. I first envisioned a method involving layers, similar to the ones inside a cake, but instead of flat and uniform, they would be curved and distorted. I planned to make the three-dimensional cut in the shape of the cylinders, capturing the layers inside. It looked great in my head, but after a lot of effort, the result was surprisingly disappointing. This led me to think that a simpler approach might work better, just projecting an image onto the cylinders and the background. So I started experimenting with stripes in Photoshop, applying all sorts of distortions. But it still didn't work. Suddenly, it felt like I had slipped into a psychedelic trip from the 60s or 70s. At that point, I realized I needed to step back and rethink the entire process. You might be thinking, rightly so, that I have explained the design, but I haven't touched on what I wanted to convey with the piece or its concept. And you are right. So let's dive into that. As an abstract artist, I enjoy incorporating multiple ideas into each piece. I want them to evoke something to serve as a layout, an environment, or even a map where the viewer can navigate their own thoughts and interpretations. For this piece, I wanted the viewer to immediately sense something precious, something reminiscent of fine jewelry, elegant, intricate, yet natural and dynamic. Jewelry often takes natural, precious materials and transforms them into elegant geometric forms. So I envisioned the cylinders as these vessels. The idea of natural precious material then led me to think about the beautiful veins found in polished marble. And that's when I decided those veins would inspire the stripes. After looking at numerous marble photos, I quickly arrived at a stripe design that felt just right. Now that you know more about my pieces concept, you can see how revisiting and delving deeper into my own ideas helped me find something I truly wanted. It meant going back all the way inside the labyrinth, near the entrance, to choose a new path, this time the right one. The cylinder's shape, as a vessel for something precious, made me think of a perfume bottle, one that captures and enhances a blend of natural scents. That's why I envisioned the stripes becoming more vivid as they are contained within the cylinders, particularly the large one, which would catch the most attention. Regarding the color palette, I decided that the main stripe would be black, drawing the attention, while different shades of teal would define the overall tone for the rest. To highlight the idea of something precious connected to minerals, I chose a bold gold accent and added a few subtle touches of brass for balance. Finally, I added a striking red as another accent. Now that I had the design, it was time to begin the process of bringing it to life. I started by focusing on the cylinders. I extracted the paper model from the 3D design in Blender, made some adjustment in Adobe Illustrator, and then refined it further in Silhouette Studio before sending it to my Silhouette Cameo machine for cutting. I quickly realized that the piece was too large and it wouldn't be stable enough to maintain its shape while supporting all the stripes in different colors on top. So I came up with the idea of adding an internal structure made from much thicker paper, which would help keep the cylinder's shape solid and sturdy. At this point, I was feeling quite impatient and eager to see something closer to the final result. So I decided to cut and glue the stripes onto the large cylinder. Of course, I didn't expect this to be the final version, just a prototype to learn from. The result was close to the final version, but I made the mistake of applying the glue in a way that left unsightly lines on some of the curved areas. Additionally, I realized the red wasn't quite right. It needed to be darker, leaning more toward a burgundy shade. But that was it. I had to start over. This time, I worked on all the cylinders. The design of the piece was correct, and the stripes were meant to fit perfectly together, but the cutting machine isn't flawless. Perhaps the texture of the different papers also affected how they were cut. The result was that sometimes I noticed tiny gaps between two stripes, revealing the white paper beneath. To fix this, I applied watercolors to those areas before gluing the stripes, choosing a color as close as possible to the adjacent stripes. This way, any micro gaps wouldn't be noticeable. Going back to the design, I realized that even when I applied pastel tones in Photoshop, the colors didn't quite work. The teal hues didn't translate well into pastels, so I decided to remove all saturation from the stripes once they were outside the cylinders, leaving just a grayscale area. This would align with the black stripe, which remained unchanged and continued throughout the piece. Then another setback arose. I didn't have paper in the right shades of gray. I tried the best options I could find, but some had a slight warm tint, others were bluish or greenish. These small differences became noticeable when everything was put together, disrupting the concept of no color. The only solution I could think of was to color the paper myself, so I turned to acrylics. I nearly gave up when it didn't work as expected. I had used a flat foam brush, thinking it would give the best results, but the texture was very similar to that of a regular brush. Then I remembered I had a foam roller somewhere, so I decided to try it. This time it worked. It still left some texture, but it actually turned out quite nice. I was finally getting close to having everything under control, with the piece almost complete. But there was one thing I should have addressed much earlier: the color of the background paper. I hadn't considered it because I assumed white would be the obvious choice. However, as the piece came together, I realized I needed something less bright. So I purchased several large sheets of paper in different shades of gray and tested them by simply placing the build elements on top. One of the shades was perfect, so I attached it to a panel, drew the guidelines for positioning the elements, and glued everything into place. The piece was finished. I hope you found this video interesting, as the creative journey is similar for every artist, regardless of the medium, and for every creative person. If you did, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you feel inclined. Your support will encourage me to create more videos like this.